Welcome to Back to Heart. This is your host, Cierra Dae. This is a podcast with a focus on how to come into more kindness, compassion, and acceptance for the self, our children, and our people. We learn tools of emotional intelligence, mindfulness, spirituality, and expression to deepen relationships and heal wounds from generations of disconnect. Thank you for being here. I'm so happy to be back in another week, in another episode of Back to Heart. And this is a special podcast episode for me because this is a topic that feels very important to my own heart and very important to the root of all of my practices and the foundations of all of my practices. So if you listen to episode 1, What is Emotional Intelligence? You heard that I'm going to be doing a few episodes of just setting some foundational pieces of what I think is important for relationships and connection. So the first one in episode 1 was emotional intelligence. And in this podcast episode, we're going to be talking about mindfulness. And within emotional intelligence is mindfulness. You have to be mindful and aware of your experience and learning how to be present to become emotionally intelligent in many different regards, both with the self and with other people. So today we're going to talk about what mindfulness is and how do we do it? What are some practices? Because I know a lot of my current audience at the time of recording this is new to some of these concepts and is also searching for more ways to feel more in control of their own emotions and feel more connected with their children and feel more in capability to handle with what comes with the reality of parenting, of raising children, of honestly just living life. Even if you don't have any children, you're listening to this podcast, life can be challenging. It comes with the ebbs and flows and the peaks and the valleys. And when we don't have tools to help us with not just the valleys, but the peaks too, it can be really hard to move through it in a way that is holistic, in a way that is well-rounded and in some ways balanced. So, with that, let's get into talking about what mindfulness is and how exactly we do it. Okay, so let's talk about what is mindfulness. The way that I would define mindfulness is entering the present moment, either physically or psychologically. Oftentimes, we are in a automatic state of being in our day-to-day in both our physical and in our mind space. And because of this, there's a lot of suffering and a lot of turmoil that can happen with this automatic state of being. Mindfulness allows us the opportunity not to stop the suffering, not to end the suffering, not to end any type of pain that we may be in, but it allows us to be able to see it from a different perspective and see it from more of a neutral perspective and the way that I describe it, in the way that it's described in many meditations and in many studies and research, is from the observer state of mind. So learning how to watch yourself in the experience of life and watch life around you. So to me, another way to describe mindfulness is truly being alive, like really being able to enter life because you're here, you're present, you're with me, I'm with you, we're with each other, and we're not in these automatic states of being. We're able to drop in into compassion, into understanding, and this is where like a lot of religions and spiritual teachings talk about the seeing the other person, like namaste, like I see the light in you, I see you, I see who you are. So being able to practice mindfulness, which is in like every yoga practice, every meditation, most spiritual practices have some kind of mindfulness built into their structures, whether or not it's spoken about or categorized or identified. It's in there in some way, shape, or form. And I live my life in a state of check-in and trying to come into some kind of mindful moment as much and as often as I can. I don't live in a state of full presence, and I don't think that it's truly possible. And I don't know if it's ever something that I actually want, because mindfulness allows me to drop in. It allows me to be able to like see things and hear things and be with things. But there is an importance also to be able to like live the human reality of just being in a way that I'm not trying to be anything else. And sometimes I'm not mindful of my actions. Sometimes I'm not mindful of my intentions. Sometimes I'm not mindful of my ways of being. And this especially is true within relationship. This is why relationship can be very challenging in not just a romantic sense, but within friendships and within parenting and things like that. We have a lot of automatic states of being because of our conditioning, the way that we are raised, the ways that we've learned how to interact. Mindfulness can allow us to be able to see these patterns and to help to support us if we want to change those patterns, and if we want something different, and if we want to see different actions or different results in our life. So let's go back a little bit at my first definition of what mindfulness is. It's entering the present moment, either physically or psychologically. So doing these different mindfulness practices that we'll talk about a little bit later in the episode allows us to drop into presence and more intention in order to be in our moment, and each moment as it is without any judgment. That's another key component of mindfulness. Is, like I said, it's a neutral space, a space of neutrality. And being an observer, if you learn how to be a true observer, being a fly on the wall, the reason why they have that saying is because flies don't have any opinions. They don't have any judgments. They're sitting there, they're on the wall, they're observing, they're using their thousands, I don't know how many eyeballs flies have, but like the kaleidoscope eyes of flies. The kaleidoscope eyes of flies. I'm going to put that in a poem. But the eyes of the flies have many perspectives, but they are not coming from a space of opinion or judgment. So this is also true in a space of mindfulness. In any mindfulness practices, you're learning how to see the judgment that we have of ourselves and see that we have this mental space that automatically comes into our mind and automatically pops up. But we aren't just that thinking. We aren't just that state of mind. We are beyond that. So being able to see the observer aspect and component of our life and of our experience is a very essential part of mindfulness. So before we get into different ways to practice mindfulness, I wanted to talk about how we can apply it within our relationships, because mindfulness, first of all, helps at the individual level. Mindfulness helps our own experience, our own internal experience, so that we are able to drop into our bodies and drop into the observer self and not get lost in whatever it is that we're thinking about or worrying about or stressing about. So it's doing these little check-ins every single day so that you're training your mind to check into neutrality and to check into calm and to peace that is always there underlying all of the stresses that are either, fake or real. Sometimes the stresses that we have in life are not full reality, And then other times there is a like very stressful situation, whether it be health or finances. Um, there's realities there that is stressful in our life, but being able to do these check-ins and do these practices helps to train us so that we can get into a practice of relaxation and relaxing our systems, because otherwise we're in this constant state of stimulation. And this is where a lot of our illnesses can manifest from, our diseases and things like this, because when we're stressed out, our immune system is lowered and then we get sick way more easily. So applying these things in our daily life, getting into this practice helps us at the individual level. So then when it's happening at the individual level, what happens in the relational level? If we are feeling better, if we are feeling in a happier state, if you think about your good days within parenting, you're typically starting the day in a good mood. You are already having a feeling of joy or excitement or peace or cherishment or whatever it may be. And so the days that you feel like you are having a better day parenting, or maybe your children are feeling those things, then those times are the times that we feel more at ease and able to parent better or relate better. So when we're able to use these practices within mindfulness and relax our own system, come into more peace, more love, more compassion, then it pours over into our relationships, and we're able to fill up our relationships when we fill up our own cups, when we fill up our own hearts. So filling up our own hearts through mindfulness practices helps to fill up the hearts of others and then fill up the hearts of our relationships. So when you are in the beginnings of mindfulness, when you are in the beginnings of these practices, maybe this is the first time you are really tuning in to listening to something about mindfulness, or maybe this is the 100th time. Mindfulness practices, they can be very, very simple, but oh my God, the benefits that they can have in these simple little things. I genuinely feel like mindfulness is the most important practice that has ever come into my life. And I have done so many practices, but being able to step out of the automatic state of being helped me to just feel more whole and feel more in touch with everything, in touch with my people, in touch with myself. So the first part of entering into these practices is learning how to create safety within our nervous systems by noticing these moments that are already pretty calm, peaceful, and enjoyable. I do not recommend going into mindfulness and trying to be this mindful guru in the state of tantrum with your toddler, or in the middle of a heated argument with your partner. It can be really, really challenging to practice mindfulness in these moments if you don't have any practice with it yet, because like I will say with every single one of these practices, this is a tool and this is a skill. Skills are typically developed over time. We're not usually very good at them when we start them out. So it's okay if you feel like you're not there yet, if you feel like you aren't fully capable of it yet. With time and with practice, your capacity will build and it will increase in your ability to be able to stay more calm in heated situations, to be able to foster more patience. So, starting out with mindfulness, we have to recognize and become aware of the fact that our thinking mind, meaning the mind that is automatically just going off. Like you have something probably going on in your mind right now as I am talking to you. It can be judgment, it can be criticism, it can be you can be thinking about dinner later tonight. You may not even be fully listening to me. And now you're like, oh my God, I haven't been listening for the past couple of minutes. I need to back this episode up. I've done that many times within podcasts and songs and things like that. The thinking mind is only one part of us, And it's not all of who we are, because now you have this awareness of this thinking mind. So if you have this awareness of the thinking mind, then what part of you is that awareness? I like to think of the human psyche, the human mind, as many different parts. And this is concepts within therapy. These are concepts within spirituality, within archetypes. Being able to pull ourselves apart and see all of these different facets of ourselves is really important to create a well-rounded and well-loved, a well-loved us, a well-loved individual. Because if we just identify with one part of ourselves, we get very stuck in that identity, and then there can be judgments around who we are, and feeling incapable and honestly unwilling sometimes to change or to shift or allow us to be anything other than what we are, because we're very identified with that one piece of us. So being able to see that you have awareness of these thinking minds, you're able to now have another identity on top of the thinking mind, because the thinking is us, that's a part of us, but so is the observational self, so is the mindful self. So this is the first part of mindfulness: watching these thoughts, seeing these thoughts, becoming an observer of our experience. I remember the first time really dropping into something other than just my thinking mind was reading the book A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. And in the first few chapters of his book, he has an exercise of awareness, of mindfulness. And the exercise was bringing your awareness and your attention into your hands. And now noticing within your hands a life force, a tingling, a sensation, noticing that there is a feeling there, that there is something here. And now bringing the awareness that you are watching that sensation happening. You're seeing that experience. You're aware of this experience. You're aware of this body. And so you're aware of who you are, but you're not just in the experience. We are in the experience, but we are also watching our experience. So this is the first part of mindfulness, is being the observer and being the watcher. And I would say the second part of mindfulness and dropping in is learning how to get grounded into our bodies. So similar to the exercise that I was just talking about with Eckhart Tolle, which I highly recommend his book. These practices of getting grounded in our body, of being mindful of our movements and of our body sensations and our feelings and senses, it allows us to see our experience in the 3D without being disconnected or disassociated with our body. A lot of us are very disconnected from our body, and we numb it with so many different things. We numb it through social media. We numb it through addictions, alcohol, drugs, smoking, food. And because of this, our mind, body, spirit is very disconnected from one another. And so these grounding meditations, these body, this mindfulness about our body and getting grounded into the body helps us to bring awareness back in, and not coming from a place of shame or any type of judgment of self, but really just being able to drop in and see these patterns, or see and watch ourselves as we are living our day to day and building that connection back with our body. So to practice mindfulness within the body, within our observational self with the body, you can do walking and eating practices. These are practices that can be done virtually anywhere at any time, so they're very accessible. Mindfulness can be dropped into at any moment, but having an intentional practice like a walking or an eating meditation or practice can help to build that muscle of mindfulness. I really like walking practices or walking meditations because I walk a lot and it helps me to ground into the earth below me while simultaneously grounding into my body by being mindful of what is happening. So, a way to do a mindfulness practice or a mindful meditation is by going on a walk, getting up. Going outside is recommended, but you can also do this inside. But going outside gives you some fresh air and it also gives you more space and more length to be able to walk. And as you're going on this walk, it can be in your neighborhood, it can be on the beach, it can be in the forest. As you're going on this walk, reflect on the reality of walks in the past, what exactly has been going on in the mental space when you go on these walks. You're typically thinking about bills or maybe some to-do list. Maybe you're thinking about problems that you're having with your spouse. Walks are typically a space for us to get lost in thinking, and this can be helpful if we need a time and space to think and process. But sometimes it can also be an opportunity for us to build that muscle of presence. So, getting up, going on this walk, heading out the door, and as you walk outside, you're dropping into your body by bringing awareness down into the bottoms of your feet, and you're watching as your heel moves on the pavement from heel to toe, and watching as your leg lifts and is placed back down on the pavement, and how the pavement comes in contact with your foot as your foot steps down, typically from heel to toe, and just noticing all of these sensations as you're beginning to make your way through the world and moving on the street, noticing your body and your knees as they move up, as they bend to make space for your leg to push further, to move through and to move further, noticing your breath as you're walking, noticing the pace of it, noticing the air as it enters your nose, and noticing it as it comes out your mouth or comes out your nose when you're breathing. I'll be posting in future episodes actual practices that you can take on walks if you need to follow some type of practice or some type of meditation to help to lead you through, so that you have these tools available to you. These are just naming some practices. Right now, you don't have to use this as we speak. You don't have to get up right now. But keeping these things in mind as you move throughout your week, when you go on a walk with your kids in the stroller, you can bring awareness to your hands when you're on this walk, as your hands are gripping the stroller, and noticing how your hands feel when it's on the stroller, how the plastic feels against your hand, how your feet feel against the pavement, how the wind feels against your face as you're walking. You can also apply your auditory senses. So, mindfulness, when you're grounding into the body and we're using mindfulness practices for the body, we're getting in touch with all of our senses. And it can be helpful at times to just tune into one sense. There's often times where I will just tune into everything that I can see, just noticing every single thing that I can see and noticing the little details and the little textures and things. There's other days where I want to close my eyes and I just want to listen. I just want to hear things. And this is a beautiful practice when you're outside and you're listening to birds and the wind and the leaves or the ocean. When we are parenting, this can also be a beautiful practice. A lot of people may not find it as enjoyable at first when we're listening to our children, because it can be a lot harsher of sounds compared to birds tweeting. But with practice, I find the screams of children just as enjoyable as the sound of the wind, depending on my emotional mood, if I'm being honest. If I'm tired, the shrieks of children in the morning aren't as appealing as the sound of birds in the morning. But they can be so enjoyable and so fulfilling and so joyful when we learn how to drop into just noticing them without judging it, without making it into a problem to be solved of our children needing to be more quiet or needing to be more still. So when you're on a walking meditation, your children are in the stroller, they might be talking a million miles a minute, or they might be singing, or they might be mumbling. If they're babies, they might just have their little baby noises and grumbles. Noticing these as you're on your walk, just listening and just hearing them. And judgments are going to come up throughout these experiences, throughout these practices. You're going to have thoughts that arise that are impulsive. We have no control over what impulsively comes into our mind. And because of this, we are learning how to have a new relationship with the impulsive thinking mind, so that it's a more respecting and honoring relationship, and we're not trying to cast these thoughts aside. We're not trying to make them go away. We're not trying to make them disappear. We're just noticing when these things come up. So you might have judgment around your kid's voice. You might want them to stop so that you can hear the birds instead, so that you can hear other things instead, and they're being too loud. Just noticing those thoughts as they come up. You are in full observation mode here. A great way to also frame it and to think about it is putting yourself in the shoes of a scientist. If you are a big fan of the intellectual framework, or if you're a scientist, maybe it's more helpful, where you are just the observer and your role is to take notes and to take observation that is not coming from any type of opinionated space. So doing this with our children helps to create more space from any judgment we have of them and any judgment that we have of ourselves as parents or as caretakers, so that we're not judging ourselves as bad parents or bad nannies or bad grandmas or bad grandpas or bad uncles because we are having these thoughts that arise or having these feelings that come up. On that note, feelings may come up within our body because of these thoughts. So, for example, when you are out on a walk with your child, they're having their little baby talk or their little child talk, and we have the thought that arises like, oh, I wish they'd stop talking. And then you have a thought on top of that, like, oh God, I'm such a bad mother. Why would I think that of my child? And now you have these feelings that are manifesting of shame in your stomach, and it's starting to feel contracting and like gross and feeling in your body. There can be a lot of judgment on top of all of that. And so then coming into awareness, like, oh, I see that I'm having a feeling right now, or I see that I feel like I'm a bad mother. I see that I think that I'm a bad mother. I see that I think that I want my child to shut up or to stop talking. I see these things. And that's it. I see it. Hey, I see that I am human. I see that I have these thoughts. And I'm just going to watch it. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm not going to try to make it go away. I'm just going to see it. Eventually, these mindful intentions and this mindful watching, this mindful observation can make way for, like, it, because it's creating more space, it can make more opportunity for the emotions to rise and to pass and to move through you. And it can make way for these thoughts to rise and to move through you and to go away. But that is not the intention behind the mindfulness practice. The practice of mindfulness is to just become aware of these feelings, of these sensations, of these thoughts, of these experiences, so that we can create these new relationships from a space of intention. So that walking meditation was a bit long, so I'm going to quickly move through the eating practice or the eating meditation, which is very similar in regards to the walking meditation. Just now we're doing it with food. So the way that I had practiced and learned was initially with grapes, because grapes are an easy and enjoyable experience for me to savor a piece of food. And I also just really like grapes. So, um, if you want to try this meditation, this can be a great meditation to do if you have a challenging relationship with food. This can be a great practice to start incorporating into your days and into your weeks in order to rebuild some kind of relationship. Like when I talk about relationships, I do talk a lot about human relationships, relationships within community. But relationships is really just a line of connection to any type of association that we have with things. And people are things, but so is food. Food is a thing. We have a relationship with food. We have a relationship with money. We have relationships with plants. I don't know. I have a plant in my room. I'm looking at it. I used to have what I thought was a bad relationship with plants. It was just that I needed to uh, rebuild the connection that I had with plants. So with this, we have relationships within food too. And I know this is very, very common for people to have a challenging relationship with food. So creating a mindfulness practice around food can be so beneficial to help you feel more connected to the food that you eat and feel more connected to your body. Again, this is the practice of getting in touch physically to the present moment. So, the practice of the grape. It sounds so much cooler than what it probably is. You get a grape and you become the observer. You put on your little observer shoes or your observer hat, whatever fits your fancy, and you begin this meditation or this practice by observing, just by looking at this grape. We're not eating this grape. We're not putting it in our mouth. We're not touching it. We're not smelling it, or we're touching it with our hands, but we're not smelling it. We're not putting it in our mouth. So you begin by just looking at this grape and just noticing all of these different attributes about the grape. Again, no judgment, no opinions. They may rise, letting them be there, see it, but then noticing again. Ways that this could look is looking at the grape and seeing, like, I see green. I notice this green all around the grape. I notice in some areas there's some darker spots on the grapes. I notice that there's a shine from where there was water at one point when I washed the grapes. I notice that there is a small indent on the top where the vine once was from the grape. I notice that there's these really, really tiny little speckles on this grape, these brown speckles. I notice that it's this round, ovalish shape. I notice that it fits in the palm and between my thumb and my index finger. And now that you've noticed, like you're noticing all of these things that you see with your eyes, now you're going to bring the awareness into the touch, into the sensation of touch, and rolling it in your hands, noticing how it feels in your hands, noticing that it might feel still a little bit wet, noticing that it might feel a little cold, noticing that it might feel soft or shiny. Well, shiny is probably more of a something that you see, but a glossy, like maybe it feels a little glossy. How does it feel when it rolls in the palm of your hand or the in between your fingers, rolling it around in your hands? And now that you have this new connection with this grape, with this one individual grape, you begin by putting it up to underneath your nose and breathing in. Depending on the grape and depending on the ripeness of this grape, there may or may not be a sensation here for for the nose, for smell, but putting it up underneath your nose and beginning to smell the grape and noticing if you can smell anything, noticing if there's nothing there, noticing if you can't smell anything. And then after you go through the smell, putting it on your lips, noticing how it feels on your lips, and then moving it into your mouth, noticing how it feels in your mouth, not chewing, not letting the teeth bite into it just yet, but noticing that sensation that might come up to immediately want to chow down, to immediately to crush whatever it's in its mouth, to consume, just noticing that feeling that you're having, that impulsive feeling, that primitive feeling of wanting to chew and swallow, but letting it just rest in your mouth, letting it sit in your mouth, letting it be there, and noticing how it feels when it rolls around your tongue. Maybe you roll it around to one side of your mouth and then rolling it to the other side of your mouth and noticing how that feels. And then with intention, taking your first bite and biting down onto the grape very slowly and noticing at every moment while it's in between your teeth, noticing how it shifts and what is happening to the grape as you're biting down into it, noticing any juices that come out of the grape as you're biting down, noticing the shape of the grape changing as from this oval shape into something more squishy and squashed. That's my scientific observation. The grape is squishy squashed. Noticing as you chomp down into it. And now moving it around in your mouth, noticing how it feels now that it's squished a little bit. And noticing that you're wanting to chew more, noticing this feeling of wanting to chew more, wanting to swallow it, but not swallowing it just yet. Noticing the impulse to want to swallow it. Noticing how your body knows what to do, noticing how your body is taking care of the process, noticing how saliva may be there may be more saliva in your mouth. And now finally, after you've moved through some of the chewing, after the consistency has changed and you've chewed it fully, beginning to swallow very slowly and at each moment again, noticing how it feels as this grape is moving from your mouth and down into your throat and now becoming one with you, noticing how it feels as it's moving into your body and noticing how your mouth responds to this, to the absence of the food, to the grape. Throughout this entire practice, you may have, I just realized I just ran through the whole practice, so you're welcome to reverse this at any time and use this for a future great meditation, but I will record another episode just specifically on that. Throughout this entire practice, you may or probably have had some kind of thoughts that came up either around your relationship with food, the judgment of the food, judgment of the self, maybe some judgment of me, thinking I'm taking too long to describe this practice or taking too long to process the grape or whatever it may be. There may be some thoughts that came up, some feelings again. Noticing that. We don't have to have any judgment around it and putting good or bad labels on it and wanting, like, it's okay to want it to be different, but just noticing that want, noticing that desire and letting it be there because you're the observer, you're the scientist in this practice. So these are a couple tools to practice at the individual level. And I really really like the eating practice because this can be applied with any type of food that you eat. It can be a snack that you're having with your kids, and you can do this while you're with your kids. Like, your kids aren't going to know. You can guide them through it if you want to, if they're old enough for a little comprehension. If they're younger, you can still describe it as you're doing it. They may not follow along in the same way, and the comprehension may not be fully there yet, but it can be beneficial. We learn through experience and through watching and observation. See where I went there? We learn through observation. Our children are watching us, And that's why I always say that our children are our mindfulness gurus, because they know how to truly be in presence and in mindfulness. And we were all once children, which means that we have these practices that we once used when we were younger, that we've come out of practice and out of our skill and our talent because of the years of life and of having to be in the hustle of our current society reality. So this eating meditation is great because you can do it at any time. It's also great because of, like I said, like you build this new muscle and this new relationship with your food, and you get a new appreciation and gratitude for these foods. Instead of just mindlessly eating, you realize like how incredible food can truly be when we learn how to savor and cherish it. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the connection between mindfulness and parenting, because a lot of my work revolves around the family unit, and my work with parents is very important to me. And so I want to touch on how to use mindfulness within parenting, because I think it's a very common concept within the parenting realms that I've been involved with, within mindfulness and mindfulness within parenting. But a lot of parents just don't know how to do it and don't really know where to start. So what I talked about earlier in these episodes, you can apply this. You're not just a parent, you're also an individual and you're a human. So use those practices, and that will help you loads within your parenting. But there's different things that you experience as a parent that you don't experience as an individual that doesn't have kids, because you have a big responsibility outside of yourself. So it can feel really hard when you feel like you don't have the time and the space to sit by yourself and savor a grape for 20 minutes because your kid is trying to eat it. I totally get it. I've been a live-in nanny before. I've worked intimately with families full time, and I know how scarce it can feel sometimes to have a moment alone and a moment of presence by yourself. So I just want to tell you that this is still possible. As a parent, it's still possible to practice these things. It just can be done in a different way. And typically, your kids are involved because they're a little part of your life and they are a part of you. So when I am nannying is actually the deepest mindfulness practice that I've ever had. I'm mindfulness and meditation teacher certified, and I got that in 2020. So that's when we went through lockdown. And at the time, I wasn't nannying because we were in lockdown. So I had a lot of time by myself. And so I went through this entire certification, and I spent a lot of time with myself. And I spent a lot of time in silence. I spent a lot of time with grapes. I spent a lot of time on walks doing these meditations and doing these practices. And it did teach me loads. It taught me a lot. But what is the point of any of these practices if we can't apply it within our relationship and with our people? So I brought it and I took it into my practices with children, and learning how to do these practices while being surrounded by children increased my ability to be present and to be in a state of observation without judgment, because I have more judgment outside of me and externally than I do internally in my personal experience. I do still have personal judgments, but I noticed that a lot of my judgments were externally. And so being able to work with families, being able to work with parents and children especially, gave me the opportunity to learn how to drop that judgment and just observe them from a field of acknowledgement and in turn, and eventually appreciation. So, like I stated earlier in this episode, I highly recommend starting these mindfulness practices when you're in moments of calm and a little bit of peace, as much peace that can come within parenting, so that you're not starting out in the middle of a tantrum trying to fully embody these mindfulness practices when you are still feeling like you're practicing the muscle and building the muscle of presence. These moments will be different with each family. So I would find a time where you and your children feel more connected. This, for some families, is in the mornings before breakfast. Maybe you have a little bit of moments to play and you do some check-ins or you're being silly with each other. For others, it's at bedtime during the tuck-in process where you're reading stories. And for others, it's in the middle of the day after they've had a chance to run out some of the energy and they will sit on your lap and snuggle with you for a moment. So find a moment that works for you and your children and you feel connected to them and you feel calm and peaceful. And begin to notice your child, not from the space of a parent, not from a space of any type of judgment. Even as a parent, you're having judgment. Judgment can be good too. You can have good judgments of yourself. You can have good judgments of your children. But what I mean by no judgment is having no judgment, no good or bad judgment. You're in a space of neutrality. So you're just noticing, you're just seeing these things in your child and things that I have used these with and practices with children. Bath time has been a big one because children are in such a big state of play at bath time where it's a very controlled space because they're in a tub and they're typically not getting out of the tub and they are playing independently a lot of the time. So this gives me an opportunity to be able to be present and practice mindfulness without having to do much interaction in that moment so that I can just purely be in a state of observation. So in the case of bath time, taking and turning your attention and your awareness to what you can see, what you notice that you are seeing around you in your environment. Looking straight out in front of you, if you're looking at the scene of your child in the bathtub, maybe you see them grabbing a toy shark and the toy shark is jumping up and it's jumping out of the water and then it jumps down and goes into the water. You're noticing if there's any dripping coming from the faucet, noticing if there is any splashing that is happening from your child, noticing if there's any water droplets coming down off of your child's face or forehead or arms, noticing if their hair is wet or their hair is dry, noticing what it looks like when their hair is wet, noticing what it looks like when their hair is dry, noticing the toys that may be scattered around the bathtub, noticing how the water feels on your skin if you place your hand in the water, noticing the warmth maybe on your skin, noticing how it feels as the water comes up your hand and your skin moves from dry to wet, noticing how it feels when you take it out of the water, how the temperature feels and how the air feels on your skin when you take it out of the water. So bringing awareness, that was, I brought in more of the physical component of putting your hand in the water, but a lot of that was through the lens of the eyes, the sense of the eyes, the senses of sight, being able to see what we are witnessing with our child, what we are experiencing with our child, because we're witnessing their play and we are within that moment with them. And when we're able to drop into that witnessing aspect and that observer self, we're able to drop into more connection with our children. Connection is made up of 4 components: presence, eye contact, physical touch, and playfulness. I would argue that presence is also built into the physical touch and the eye contact, but nonetheless, practicing the skill of mindfulness helps to build that first skill of presence so that you can build more connection with your child, so that these moments that seem repetitive, that seem frustrating or so annoying sometimes, you can learn how to drop in to these moments with your child and be present with them in these moments so that you can build a connection with them. As you get into more of a practice with this, these skills start to build on top of each other, and you are able to apply these to harder situations like fights, arguments, tantrums, disagreements, and you're able to be the watcher and the observer while simultaneously being the interactor and being the person who makes choices and decisions and moves forward in their life from a more intentional place. But getting these practices in now where it's a little bit more calm and collected is essential. We'll talk a little bit later in future episodes about how to regulate your body and regulate your system while you're in those bigger feeling spaces, and maybe how to apply some mindfulness practices in those spaces too. Um, the basics and the foundations are the same, but sometimes it's easier when we hear the examples and hear the concepts explained out loud than to just be like, now take all of that and apply it to every situation in your life. Take that eating a grape and apply it to every other situation in your life. All right, my friends, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to this. I hope it was helpful. If you would like to get connected with me, you're more than welcome to message me on Instagram at any time. You can shoot me an email. I would love to be connected with you. If you'd like to hear specific topics and specific episodes, please let me know what you'd be interested in hearing. Otherwise, give this station or this channel, wherever you're listening from, whether it's on Apple or Spotify, give it a subscribe or a follow and leave a review if you are open to sharing about your experience and how you felt in listening to this podcast, or maybe how it helped you in your life. I'll be having some guest episodes soon that I'm really excited about to help give you guys more tools and more understanding about how to connect with ourselves and our children and our people deeper. So thank you for being here. Thank you for coming back to heart, and I will talk to you guys soon.